books. I like how simple it is.
Thank you. I had to fight with my publishers on that. By the way, I'm not happy with that green button because the button has to be longer. If you look at an iPhone and you see the button, it is longer. So I've taken it up to a very high level, but I work with Penguin, and Penguin are very tight in what they will do and what they won't do. So they said, this is the size you'll get, take it or leave it. So the first print run is over. The second print run, I've asked for it to be, you have an iPhone.
Yeah, I do.
Open it and see.
I know.
The button is longer.
Yeah.
And they have compressed it here based on their own idea.
Until you mentioned, I still get the message very clearly.
So the purpose is served. And I insisted on white, which fortunately they accepted, because white, the problem with white is that it gets dusty and dirty.
Yeah.
So if it lies in a retail showroom for some time, but fortunately they've embossed it and they've done some UV radiation on it. Not radiation, UV treatment on it. So it stands out. These are the tricks of getting a book done by a good publisher.
Yeah.
That if you know the right questions to ask, you can push them and they'll do it. So embossing means it stands out. If you touch it, it's not smooth. And UV means that if you look at it from various angles, the color changes. Not completely, but from gray to black to blackish gray, that change comes in. So these are the questions to ask. And if any of you want to publish, you have to have a track record, and then they start listening to you.
Okay.
But the first time, they treat you like that you're an interference, and they lose money on you. But once you do well in publishing and you do 10 or 15,000 copies, then they're making money. At 5,000, they make zero money, zero. And in fact, we joke that they have a Diwali party once a year, where they take all the books that are not selling and they burn them, because they have no space in their warehouse to keep the books. So it's a big problem in publishing. That is all the negative. The good side is that thanks to Amazon, the price of books has fallen so dramatically. You can pick up this book for 220 rupees today. And 220 is you buy a coffee, it is 220. And a coffee stays with you for 10 minutes. This book stays with you for as long as you like. So, any other questions generally about publishing? Any of you who have aspirations to write?
So, Professor,
Yeah.
I had a question, and I did write on LinkedIn when you shared that you are coming here. So I'm working as a senior leader in my organization and also studying at IIMA. I mean, we started our tagline of our organization as the complex, digital complex, and then after that we thought it's better to not write the complex and write simple kind of a thing. So what is that one habit do you think as a senior leader we should start acting on instead of being that complex from your point of view?
So that is the whole objective of the book, is to demystify and make everything simple. Because I think we tend to overcomplicate matters. We tend to think that if we give a complex answer, it has more value. People will treat us with more respect. But in fact, we argue in the book that it's the reverse. That in fact, it is difficult to make something simple. It is not easy. And Apple is a classic example where they are obsessed about simplicity. Do you need 10 buttons? We hardly use them. Can't you just have an on-off button and one for volume control? So these are the kind of questions that Apple are constantly asking. And it's easy to give extra features, thinking the client will pay for extra features. Today, the client doesn't have the time or the mental bandwidth. So they prefer something very simple and ordinary. I think let's make a start here.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I want to admit is that if all of you have come for some academic intellectual gyan, either go away or go to sleep, because I'm basically a short story writer. I write short stories. So everything I couch as a short story. It's a story. The difference is that you can have stories in...
I'll just...
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's absolutely fine. Okay, on the Vikram Sarabhai Library, I welcome you all to today's book talk, supposed to be by, Professor Mukesh Sud. Of course, Professor Mukesh Sud, everybody is a associate professor at IIM for almost
Nine years.
okay, almost a decade. And then, small scale in others and sprayed coatings. Of course, the author, uh, this is his third, but it is first solo book. The book, I think it's better to listen from to talk more about the book itself.
I love this introduction because it's brief and tight. Otherwise, the audience goes off to sleep by the time the introduction is over. So, as he said, this is my first solo single author book. So, this is a book where I accept all the brickbats and the praises because I had it my way completely. And I want to identify Dharun. Where is Dharun? Dharun is a guy who worked with me in all the illustrations. And you will see that the illustrations form the core of the book. So we have used lots and lots of illustrations. There are, I think, 50 or 60 odd illustrations. And they're all simple black outlines. There's no color. Obviously, you can't because it will become too expensive. I don't even allow shading. So I like something very simple, very elegant, and it says less and leaves more to the imagination. So I like using the example of a painting. Now, when you go to an art gallery and you see a painting, the painter or the artist doesn't stand behind the painting and guide you through every line, every mark, every color. You bring your own life experience to the painting and you interpret it the way you want to. And that probably is richer in context than even the artist could have thought of. So I go with the same belief that you need to explain a very short story, a parable, and leave it to the reader to then interpret the story based on their experience. And very often that interpretation may be more powerful than even the writer intended. So that's the style I write in. And every single story that I'm going to narrate today, I call it a story or an anecdote, but they're all true. They're all based on some activity or action that took place and that has been cited in a journal. And all those citations are there in the book. So let's make a start. We have a bias towards complexity. We like complex. We enjoy something that is convoluted. We don't like a simple, straightforward answer. And the reason for that is that we look at all problems and get confused by them, by many of them. Now, when the problem itself is confusing and we're not clear about the problem, then we expect that the answer should also be complex. How can a complicated, complex problem have a simple answer? Not possible. So the lens that we are using to analyze most things around us is a lens that tells us complexity is part of the ecosystem. So we react like that. The second thing is we are receiving lots and lots of information today, and much of it is contradictory. It says one thing and the other, and or. So we tend to get even more confused. So we have to separate so-called the wheat from the chaff and identify through curation what we really need. Finally, if you play a game, you enjoy reading a book, you want a complex, juicy story. You don't want something in 4 lines. And these are the reasons that today we tend to have bounded rationality, which is that our limitation in terms of what we can understand is limited. We also have an excess of choices. So all this is complicating the entire scenario and making it important for solutions to be as complicated as possible with multiple layers to it. This book takes the opposite view, saying that not all problems, but most problems can be broken down, and we'll explain the 3 steps that are required to break a problem down. Small is Beautiful is a book that was written 70, 80 years ago. It's one of the path-breaking books on simplicity. And Schumacher argues any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. In fact, it takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. A classic book on simplicity, Small is Beautiful. But this story was 50 years ago, 5, 6, 7 decades ago. More recently, Steve Jobs has argued that making things simple is difficult. It's not easy. But once you make them simple and make them clean, he was obsessed with everything being clean. All angles, all rounds, all shapes should be well rounded and clean. Once you do that, then you can achieve a lot through that. And if you see, most of the Apple products are like that. If you notice, very rarely will you get a manual to operate an Apple product. Why? Because it is assumed that it is so intuitive that describing what to do is more difficult than actually doing it. So like you turn a page in a book, no one gives you an instruction how to turn a page. You do it intuitively. So Apple is one of the first few companies that has done it, but many companies now have followed this. All has emerged from Silicon Valley. Okay, the question is why, how can we think simply? Now we have made 3 propositions for simplicity. The first thing I'm saying is break a bigger problem into smaller chunks. Don't treat it as an amorphous big problem. Try and see whether you can break it up into smaller pieces. We call them chunks. And as the quote goes by a philosopher, and I've quoted that in the book, the problem is not the problem. The problem is, how do we see the problem? What is the lens that we are using to see the problem? The second thing we argue is that you need to have paradoxical thinking. Now that also is not an easy thing. A paradox means that there are 2 opposites that you have to live with. Now, we always want to have a logical mind and we want to reach a conclusion that either this is correct or that is correct. I'm arguing that both can be correct. And that is the interesting part of a paradox. You can be happy and sad at the same time. And I'll give you all this through a number of examples. And the last thing is, look for clues others have ignored. And here I picked up something from Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson are partners in crime, you are aware of it, and they're all looking at the same evidence. And Dr. Watson is seeing. Sherlock Holmes is observing. And there's a big difference in the two. Seeing is what you see. Observing is what you infer from what you see. So the argument here, it's not what you see. It's what you observe, which is what you infer from what you have seen. This is an example of what we call paradoxical thinking, which means you're looking at 2 different things and you're willing to accept that 2 different things will have 2 different objectives, 2 different statements. They are opposite, but they can live together. Now, this was an example that Dharun gave. Oh, you are the Goldman Sachs lazy people? No, please come. Hi. So this is an example that Dharun gave, and we worked this into an illustration where you can have an AC on and you can have fresh air. Now this is a simple example of paradoxical thinking. And if you start looking around, paradoxes exist everywhere. And we deal with paradoxes every day of our life. And we accept them. But when it comes to taking decisions, why are we trying to resolve that paradox? That paradox could be an advantage to you. It could work in your favor. And I'll give you examples of that. Now, don't we have a plan for the day? But we also build in some flexibility in case some events occur that need our attention. So we have a plan and we are flexible. Now, isn't that a paradox? Isn't that 2 opposites? But we do it all the time and we are very happy with it. Don't we balance our professional and personal lives? We have to do it. That's part of who we are. And the third example I've used here is, can you be a manager and a friend to your subordinate. Now, the two are opposites. If you're a manager, you're not a friend. If you're a friend, you're not a manager. But our objective is to be both to them. So these are paradoxes that we deal all the time. In the book, I've used the examples that Toyota has used. And Toyota has a number of paradoxes that they make their employees learn very early in their career. The Nobel Prize winner, Bohr, made this statement: how wonderful that we have met a paradox. Now we have some hope of making progress. And if you see a number of scientific discoveries, they all occurred when the team researching or doing work in that field came across two opposites and then said, how do we cross this chasm? And the answer is, we accepted both opposites. Light is a particle and a wave. Scientific fact. Isn't that a paradox? We accept it. A simple thing like inhaling and exhaling, they are opposites, but they are both essential for life. We have to both exhale and inhale, and we are doing two opposites. Okay, I'll run through this. I like the example of Picasso. Now, he was one person who used light and dark in the same painting. And there's an experiment that was carried out in an art class where the students were drawing a picture of a model. And one group of students was told, draw the picture and shade it. The other were told, assume that the top of the model is in darkness. And gradually the darkness gives way to light. Now draw it. These drawings were then taken to expert artists who were asked to analyze them. And guess what? The people who had drawn the model with shades of darkness that led to light, those paintings were much richer in context and were judged to be much better. So these are examples where other fields have used paradoxes to their advantage. Please come. Hi. Come. The world is full of obvious things that nobody by any chance ever observes. They see it, but they don't observe it, which means that they don't draw any conclusion or inference. They see something, it registers, and they leave. But Sherlock Holmes sees the same thing that Dr. Watson does and reaches a conclusion which solves a mystery. Okay, these are the chapters in the book, and what you see on top is the name of the chapter. What you see in smaller is the subtitle, and these are the chapters that are there in this order in the book. And all these chapters are all a bunch of stories, nothing else. I'll walk you through a few. This is the chapter opening for the first chapter, and the initial chapters, the chapter opening has an image on both sides, and we ran a contest here. So we put this up on LinkedIn, and we didn't write down the name of the chapter, we didn't write down what the chapter was about, and we asked people to guess, write a caption for this image that you think it explains the image. And we got hilarious answers. One said, before marriage, after marriage. The question is, which is before marriage and which is after marriage? Another said, a Zepto or a Swiggy driver, completely lost. So we've just given 3 prizes for the caption for this, but this is how the chapter starts, where it's all about eating, about food. The chapter is about food. And I asked some very, very simple questions. This chapter called Eating Wisely. And the gyan here is in 7 words. Eat food. Not too much, mainly plants. Now, aren't we all eating food? Yes. We're not. That is the funny part. We are all eating ultra-processed food. Food is what you see as a sabji, as a vegetable, as a fruit, which you buy and you cook. We're not doing that. not too much. And here we have gone through and I've discussed the story of the French paradox, where the French eat very heavy food, full of fat, full of oil, but they are the slimmest people in Europe. How do they do it? Because of the way they eat it, and they eat smaller quantities. And the last one is mainly plants. There's enough research to show that a diet, not entirely vegetarian, but mainly vegetarian with plants and fruits, leads to much better longevity and a healthier life. All this is explained through stories. So at no stage will I tell you do this or don't do this, but I'll give you a story which is based on factual evidence. The 2 words of advice: eat anything you like. The condition is cook it. And I've explained that again through a story on the advantages of cooking. There's a lot of data on poor families who spend more time in the kitchen and rich families who spend less time in the kitchen, and the health outcomes. Which health outcome is better? Poor families or rich families? Poor families, because they cook. And this change of tradition that occurred in America and then spread to Europe happened because the American government wanted to pull women out of the house and get them into the workforce. So that's when fast food started, ultra processed food started, and the net result was bad health. Besides what we eat is how we eat it. The French paradox: they eat saturated food, they eat chocolates, oily food, but they are healthier. The reason is they don't sit in front of the TV and eat. They eat as a social meal where they are having conversations with people. Secondly, their unit sizes are smaller. The average American unit size is about 50% more than the average European unit size. Now, because the unit size is smaller does not mean you have more multiples of that and eat the same as an American. So Europeans eat more conservatively. And that's what is called the French paradox. Okay, so this is another interesting story. It starts with a professor at the University of South Australia. And she is doing some homework, some investigation on the health of hunter-gatherers. And she finds that as the hunter-gatherer lifestyle starts getting extinct because of Western influence, people are getting unhealthy. So she says, let's do an experiment. Let's take a bunch of Aborigines, who are the native people who have traditionally lived as hunter-gatherers, but are now eating a Western diet. Because what happened was that as the Westerners or the whites took charge of Australia and became larger in number, the church stepped in and said, the way you people live are barbarians. This is not the way to live. And they started giving them flour. They started giving them milk products and said, eat what we give you. And much of that was saturated fat. So this woman, this lady professor says, let me take a bunch of people, 10 or 12 Aborigines who are unwell, under medical supervision. She was a medical doctor also herself, a trained medical doctor, and she was a professor. And I'll take them for 7 weeks across Australia, and we will live like their forefathers lived, which means they have access to nothing except one thing, a fire. So they had the ability to light a fire, but they would live like their forefathers did. And they would have zero contact with civilization, and we will monitor all their medical parameters. The blood, the sugar, everything will be monitored. And this is the way they traveled. They were in Derby for about 10 days. Then they wanted some more fresh water, fish and meat. They traveled to the coast, and then they were traveled inland. So for 7 weeks, there was no contact with anybody. She was the only, the only medical professional. All food that was consumed was kept in nitrogen, a sample kept, it was weighed. So we knew exactly what they were eating, how much they were eating. And that happened for 7 weeks. What do you think happened after 7 weeks to all their parameters medically? Improved dramatically. all the meta abnormalities of type 2 diabetes, and there were many of them were diabetic, were greatly improved or completely normalized by a relatively short revision to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Now, there were times when these guys were eating 2 to 3 kilos of meat every day. But our bodies are so conditioned that even if we eat a lot, as long as a rest period, and you've heard of intermittent fasting now, the body is able to retain that and keep going for longer periods. The lady, the professor herself, lost 7 kilos of weight, but she never felt hungry. And we've explained all these anomalies in the story. Unfortunately, I couldn't interview her. She is off the radar. And one question that is perpetually asked is, what happened to these Aborigines when they went back to civilization? That answer we don't have. But we know that during these 7 weeks, they lived exactly like their forefathers. They hunted their own food. They used to go and collect honey, for example, and climb up. That's the earlier one I showed you. Climb up to a tree and get honey down, despite being stung by bees. And honey, by the way, was considered to have medicinal properties. It was considered to be a treat and was an offering to the god. Now, the problem is that we do not put in the effort to get something sweet. We have it available as sugar. But in the olden days, it was all through the trees that they went and they got honey down from. Okay. Okay, so we said we will give a few prizes. This is the first question. Well, let me see who can answer this question. What exactly is this? There's one book available for that. Raise your hand if you think you have the answer. Raise your hand. Yes, what is it? Sorry? Toothpaste. Very good. You get an answer. So she gets one book. Viral bhai, very book. Nice. Can you imagine? This is yogurt. The way is written Gogurt. Gogurt. And the ingredients are corn syrup, modified cornstarch, kosher gelatin. These are the ingredients in this so-called yogurt. This contains more sugar than an ice cream. And how do children eat it? How do children eat this yogurt? No. Sorry?
It's a lunch box.
How do you eat it? Like a toothpaste, you put it on a tooth. That's right. That's how they eat it. How was yogurt traditionally made? How do we make yogurt at home, some of us? Milk? Yeah. And can you see how it is transformed? And the irony is that this so-called Gogurt or yogurt is sold in the healthy aisle, where you're supposed to be getting healthy food. It is far from healthy. So you can see how when we say eat food, most of us are not eating food. We are eating ultra-processed food. Okay, this is the next chapter on negotiating with a terrorist. And there are 3 suggestions I have given, all of them coupled with stories. None of them are just Gyan. The first is listen with empathy. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And this was picked up through a hostage negotiator who had resolved 150 odd hostage situations. And every time the FBI does that, they always ask both the negotiator and the terrorist, what was it that resolved the problem? And the answer is always the same or very similar. It's not what the negotiator said, but the way they treated us that finally resolved the problem. Save face, I've used the example of USSR, which happened, of course, many years ago when the USSR was disintegrating and the Western powers were on top of the situation, and they never allowed a feeling ever to go that we have won, that you have lost, because the USSR was very unstable at that time. Gorbachev, who died recently, was the president, and there were stories of coups under him because the USSR was very touchy about the fact that the West had managed to break a huge country into smaller countries. So I've used that story to explain that you need to save face. It's not about my winning and you losing. It's about my being sensitive that you have your own problems and I need to package the product. This is packed up. I've used Warren Buffett. Now, Warren Buffett, as you probably know, is one of the best investors ever. And he has a habit of, when he's giving you good news and everything is going well, he will remind you of some stupidity that he did many years ago. Now, why does he do that? He never gives you unadulterated good news. There's always a little bit of kitsch in it, where he reminds you of a mistake he made. Why?
So next time, if there is some problem happening to the portfolio,
You will then do what he says. So I've used this story where he has repeatedly done this. Every time everything is going fine, he'll remind you of something that he did that was wrong. Then the believability goes up and you trust him even more. Okay, I'll go through quickly with this because we are already at 5 o'clock. Okay, so this is a joke that we put in. I'll give you a minute to see it. This is a medical school professor asking his students, what part of the human autonomy swells to twice the size when aroused? And the answer is the pupil. And I've used that as a story, and there's so much of research that says that eye contact is where 50% communication is taking place. There's so much of research that tells us that when the American troops were in Iraq, when they wore sunglasses and they wore shades, the number of incidents and deaths went up. The moment the glasses were removed and there was eye contact. And you might have seen that when you're trying to overtake or you're trying to, get ahead of the line and you're interfering with some other car. All you need to do is make eye contact with the other driver and smile. And there's a good chance they let you go through. So eye contact is something that children do very well. Now, all our pupils expand when we get excited. But what happens in a child is that because the child is not grown fully, the child's face is small. And the child's eyes are disproportionately large compared to the face. So the child makes contact with you and it's very mesmerizing. That's why we find children cute, because of that eye contact. So I've used that as into a number of stories on how eye contact is key in communication, and especially during actions of terrorism. That's how negotiators negotiate. They make eye contact, and that warmth starts a relationship. Okay, this is the next chapter, and here I've talked about Team Indus. Some of you may remember there was a guy who wanted to be astronaut or a space scientist, and he ends up just being a software engineer. One day he's sitting on his desk and sharing the desk with somebody from Google, and there's an announcement of the GLX prize, which is a Google prize for landing a rover on the moon, making it travel 500 meters and send a selfie back. So he gets very excited and he volunteers and he tells the organizers, if there's any team from India, put my name down as a free volunteer. Well, a week before the event closes, he gets a call from the organizers to say, there's no team from India, but would you like to form a team? So he promptly calls up 2 or 3 of his friends. They have zero knowledge of how to take a spacecraft to the moon. And they put in the money and they form a company called Team Indus. And I've narrated that story in detail of how that plays out. Then I've used this Just Do It, which again is narrated through a story. And finally, the DARPA race, which I'll talk a little about, which is very interesting because this was an event organized by DARPA, which is the defense wing of the US military. And they organize a race, which I'll talk a little bit about. Okay, so DARPA says that it is now 30 or 40 years since the internet was announced or started working. Now we are organizing a competition. The competition is that we will take 10 weather balloons, which are all red in color, which are 8 feet in diameter, and we will put them up at different places in mainland USA. So the balloons will be 15, 20, 30 meters in the air. They are red in color, 8 feet in diameter, and they'll be pulled down every night. Next morning, again, they'll be raised. And there'll be an agent from DARPA standing at the base, If you come and ask and identify, they'll give you a certificate. The first team to identify all 10 balloons gets $40,000. It's not so much the money, it's the prestige that we have managed to identify all the 10 balloons. The idea was to see what happens on networks, how information travels, how information is ratified, and how truthful that information is. That's the objective of the whole exercise. And very interestingly, they announced this only 1 month before the competition because they don't want teams to start assembling technology into such a high level to be able to solve the problem. Totally 4,000 teams participate from 39 countries. 350,000 people are involved in this drama, in this game. And the team from MIT is able to locate 10 balloons in less than 9 hours. The interesting part is that the team from MIT got aware of the competition, a student-led team, only a couple of days before the event, when one postdoctoral student from Switzerland calls in to his friend at MIT and says, "Are you taking part in this competition?" He says, "What competition?" He says, "The DARPA competition." So 3 days before the competition, he assembles a team. And in less than 9 hours, they can locate all 10 balloons. Question is, how? What technology did they use? Okay, so that's question number 2 for a prize. What technology did they use? Facebook.
Alumni and everybody. So
A little more than that, not a student network. She's pointed you in one direction. A little more. What? Organizing what? No, I'm not giving a prize for that because you're partly there but not fully there. The answer is they use no network, nothing. What they did was simply word of mouth cooperation. This was supposed to be a competition. They said, "We are not in a competition. We are in a cooperation mode. And we will use only one thing, word of mouth." That's it. What they did was they looked at how powerful social networks work. And this is a very interesting concept in sociology. How does information travel across networks? And they set up an incentive structure where you were encouraged to report a sighting. Now, there's a trick to this answer also. If I encourage you to report a sighting, are we in competition or are we cooperating? But to cooperate, you need one more extension to this argument. What is that? Sorry?
team feeling should be there to work.
No, a little more than that. If I want to extend this network, and it's covering entire US mainland, which is huge, and there are just 10 balloons. Partly yes, partly is to get your friends to come and join you, to increase the size of the community, so that we are all then participating in a joint game. Now, what they've done is, they started by saying, if you spotted the balloon, we'll give you $2,000. But the chances of your spotting a balloon are probably 1 in a few million. Very unlikely. But how can I motivate you? I tell you that if somebody else spots the balloon that you have brought into the competition, I will pay that person also. And if that person's friend, whom that person brought into the competition, can you see how we are increasing the size of the network? So we are encouraging you to cooperate, not to compete, because you can only win if all 10 balloons are sighted. If you sight 5 or 6 or 7, you have not won. So the way to go about it is to increase the network size. And I've used not only DARPA, but other examples and stories to explain how this whole thing has worked. And it goes on and on. So in this case, the person's friend's friend, you don't even know them. But because I've created a network structure where I'm encouraging you to cooperate, you are increasing the size of the pie. Okay, the next chapter is about, I've used the title Flirting with Failure, and it's about changing course midway in your life. And I've used many examples here of people who have suddenly decided that this is not for me. They are successful in what they do, and then they take a call that I need a different life. I've said you need to be experimenting, again, through stories and stories. You need to laugh at yourself, the power of self-depreciation. And I've used examples in comedy of how comedians are always doing this. And lastly, how to badmouth people who work against you, and why it works so effectively in the field of magic. I've looked at the field, half the chapter is about magicians and comedians and examples from there. And the first one I use is this guy called Papa CJ. Have you heard of him? He's a comedian. In fact, he's going to be teaching the new course I'm offering at Ashoka starting next Tuesday, where I'm bringing him for a few classes. He starts off his life, he's a middle class guy. Family is well to do, but not very rich. And he lands up at Oxford and does an MBA. Now, post his MBA, he is working with IBM in their consulting division and doing well, paying back his student loans. And suddenly the company announces that IBM, that we will give you a year off. We will pay you 50 or 60% of your salary, and we guarantee you a job when you come back, but go away. And a large number of people at IBM take up that offer. He does too. He's not too thrilled with his job, and he goes to the Edinburgh Festival, and he sees a comedian sitting there drinking beer and telling jokes, and everybody is laughing. And he decides he wants to be a comedian. That's how his journey in life starts. And he explains how he did it. So I've used him as an opening story in one chapter, explaining how he moves from being a corporate executive to being a penniless comedian who has done 250 gigs. And I wrote a story where he travels to a university for 6 hours of driving. He reaches the university to find exams are on. So the audience has a number of 3 people attending, and he has to drive 6 hours back. So this is the kind of lifestyle he went through for 4, 5, 6 years. And finally, he had a chance to attend the King Gong event in London, where there's an event that is held once a month. And in fact, I saw it on this trip because he told me you must go and see it since you've written about it in the book, where there's a large number of audience and a comedian is performing. And at some stage, 3 people in the audience have a red card. So one red card goes up, the second goes up, when the third goes up, you're thrown out. And he is called saying, look, anyone wants to volunteer? He volunteers. He goes up. And he manages to pass these 5 minutes, the outer limit is 5, without a single card going up. And that's the day he decides, I can do this financially, I can support myself. He did a TEDx talk at Ashoka recently, which he has just put online, and where he has used this phrase, which I like a lot, succeeding at the wrong life. And I look back, I joined the IIT, this is of course way back, many decades ago, but I didn't join because I wanted to go to the IIT. I joined because I cleared the exam, and then people said, what a stupid fool, he's not going, he's cleared the exam. So I went. I mean, that was not the right logic. But within a year of joining the IIT, I knew that engineering is nowhere meant for me. I'm not an engineer, but I did 5 years of engineering. So succeeding at the wrong life is something many of us go through. Till we ask ourselves, is this success? Why are we letting someone else define our success? Why can't we define it ourselves? And I've used many examples in this chapter of stories around it. Okay, now how do magicians protect their secrets? And the answer is, they badmouth a thief. So this is the second question today. How can you protect a secret? By just giving a thief a bad name. By the way, you can't go to court. Why can't a magician go to court? No, but why would the magician not go to court? A magician cannot go to court. Why? No, because you have to disclose the trick to the court. And once the court knows what the trick is, it is in public domain, then the trick has to you, right? Okay, so how can you protect your tricks if you're a magician, if you can't go to court? How can you do it? By just giving a bad name to the thief. Why? Why does it happen only in magic? And magic is a very interesting field. They protect their tricks only by bad mouthing a thief. How and why?
Divert the mind of the audience.
No. So if you steal my trick, which I've invented, I'll badmouth you and you'll be out of business. Why? Yes.
Protecting their interest and they don't want to pay attention to, so they divert the attention to something else.
Erosion of trust.
Sorry?
Erosion of trust. Or erosion of
That would be a
You know how the game works. Many owners of comedy clubs are magicians themselves or have been magicians. So their interest is to promote the profession and make it legitimate. So the moment there is one person who's breaking that unwritten law by copying somebody's trick, what's going to happen? They won't get any more gigs, they won't get any more assignments, and their careers are over. So this unwritten law has protected magicians' tricks for donkey's years. And there's so much of research that has gone into this. Why is the magic industry able to self-regulate itself? Same thing with comedy clubs. You cannot repeat somebody else's joke. The moment you do it, you will not get any further assignments because the people who are organizing these shows are themselves magicians or comedians. So they have a vested interest to promote that field. And that's how it works. An owner of a comedy club said, if you steal jokes, other comedians will treat you like a leper. They will make phone calls to people who give you work. And I've used many examples in the book of stories where people's career comes to an end, all because they have copied somebody's trick. What is the caption you would put on this?
time to what it provides. You know,
Something more hilarious. Come on. A prize for this. Come on. Something. Don't reinvent the wheel.
it's
Who is the guy there?
I'm too busy, don't disturb.
Who is that person you see in this picture? The person. Huh? Okay, so one prize here. Jeff Bezos. So we've got two prizes out. One will go up in the end. So this is when Jeff Bezos was getting married. And that's how Dharun thought of this illustration. You know his story of his marriage recently. I mean, he bought over a city somewhere and closed it down and spent huge amount of money. And I've traced a number of his stories about his attempt to come out with an equivalent to the iPhone. And that's how the story opening is, that he is telling his team to build the equivalent to an iPhone. And it's an impossible job because the iPhone is a premium product. Amazon is not a premium company at all. It is a low-cost company with good quality. So and no one has the guts to tell him that, look, you are asking for something impossible. And when the phone is really ready to be distributed, he suddenly says, I want this phone to recognize a song or even a painting in the dark. So they go back to the drawing board and they start doing that. And this goes on and on and on till they come out with a product that fails miserably. And from a price of $199 that it was launched at, it is selling for $1. And this is one of his colossal failures, which is how we argue in the book that to manage your boss, and in this story, Jeff Bezos is the boss, the first thing is speak up. Don't shut up. And I've used a rather gory story about an accident at Tenerife, which is a tragic story, which you know about the story. Two aircrafts collided on the ground. 580 people died. The single biggest tragedy in civil aviation. Both the aircrafts are on the same runway and they are going towards each other. How can that happen? It did. And one aircraft engineer, and they're all dead in that KLM aircraft, knew that there was something wrong going on. And he's talking in the mic, telling the air traffic control that, look, we're all on the same runway. What's going on? And they collide. So I've narrated that full story and the number of occasions when they could have avoided the confusion many occasions. And 580, 581 people died. And the tragedy is there is one lady on the aircraft where everybody dies. And she has to go to another island. But because there is a terrorist threat on that island, the aircraft is diverted to another island. But that's the island she wants to go to. So rather than go back now and take a boat, what does she do? She illegally gets out of the aircraft and goes home. She's the only person who lives. So I've told the story from her perspective. The other is you have to question rules. You have to keep asking, can this rule have unassumed or unknown consequences that will come back to bite me? Because part of the problem that this captain was in a hurry to take off was that they had changed the rules about how many hours people could work in the cockpit. So he was back calculating that if I don't take off within this time and the clouds are coming down, it's getting dark, he overloads his aircraft with aviation turbine fuel because he doesn't want at the next destination to refuel. There was no need of so much fuel. And when the two aircrafts touch, it is a split second touch and a scrape, that's all. But enough to create complete confusion. And till a few hours after the accident, they think only one aircraft has had an accident. Only when they go there do they find that there are two aircrafts, 580 people dead on the runway. And the last story is it's the message. It's not what you think you are saying. It's making sure that others hear what you mean. Again, I've explained that through a story. I'm sorry? I have talked about the power of checklists. Our checklist is just a list that everybody makes of jobs that you need to be done. Now, in the medical field, it's a big story because I wouldn't say very often, but sometimes they operate on the wrong patient or they operate on the wrong leg or the wrong hand. No, it's a fact.
It happens.
It happens in the medical field. But my story is much more simpler. My story starts with a simple thing called a catheter. Now, a catheter is something that they put into your neck when they want to intravenously give you nutrition or drugs and you are in the hospital for a long time. Now are you a medical person? Okay. So that catheter is put here and it is left here. The problem is that catheter causes infection. And for decades, 30, 40 years, they are working on technology. How can I improve the material of the catheter so that the infection, because the cost of that infection is huge. It means an extra a week or two in the hospital, even death. Till one doctor whose father is misdiagnosed with cancer, which it was not, dies. And that doctor says, my objective in life is now to solve this simple problem. Why is the catheter causing problems and how can I resolve it? And does that have implications for other areas of medicine? So he says, let's not even bother about technology. Let's put even a dirty catheter. But let's try and understand what is going on in the operation theatre. Why is this problem there? So he takes a completely different approach, a very simple approach. Rather than spend money, put silver catheters and all that nonsense, let's ask ourselves a simple question. Have doctors done these 4 or 5 things? Number 1, have they washed their hands with soap? Simple question. Number 2, have they cleansed the patient's skin with an antiseptic? Very simple questions. Number 3, have they put drapes over the entire patient body? Number 4, is everybody in the operation theatre with a mask? And followed. I think the mic is.
Yeah, you can use this one.
Because they find through their research, and the doctor proves it in one hospital. Just in one hospital, it was proved that the rates of Lyme infection went from 11% to 0 by following these 5 rules. Number 2, in that hospital, 43 infections were saved. 8 deaths were avoided. They then rolled this out throughout the state of Michigan. It's a very interesting story that has been repeated in many medical journals. The savings are 175 million in costs and 1,500 lives saved. Now, my question to you, which was the third quiz question, how will you implement it? No. Sorry. There, she gets the prize. The third prize goes here. The head nurse has told the doctor, ask these 5 questions loudly and you can stop the operation if these 5 questions don't have a yes. That's it. And they could do it in one hospital because that hospital was running out of funds. They didn't have money. So in desperation, they said, let's try this experiment. The experiment was so successful that the insurance companies then took over and said, like hell, this will be done in every hospital in the state. Very soon that spread all over the US. And today, checklists. There's a guy called Atul Gawande. He's written a book called the Checklist Manifesto. Checklists can save lives. Airlines use checklists all the time. Now the head nurse has the right to stop the operation if answer to these 5 questions is not yes. And they practice that. And this is how successful checklists are. So, we think of complex solutions to problems. The problems are always simple to solve if we understand what the problem is. Pilots have this problem. They have taken multiple flights and they are reaching the end of a sector of 8-9 hours of flying. They are in a hurry to get home. And there's a term for it. It's called get-home-itis. So I will then take a shortcut on my last part of the journey where I'm due to land and I know there's a risk. I can do a fly around or I can go to the next closest airport. But I'm tired. I've had 8-9 hours in the cockpit. I've done my duty for the day. I want to go home. So I take a risk. I land. And there's so much of research that shows that get-home-itis results in death in lives. So now the rule is that the number 2 in the cockpit and even the crew serving outside the cockpit have a right to ask questions. And you reevaluate that are we where we thought we would be, or we need to reassess the situation and take a new decision. And I've used the example of a horse. Again, there's research on this. If you ride a horse and you take the horse through very jagged and dangerous territory, the horse will do whatever you say, despite the risk. But the moment the horse sees its home, it will refuse to listen to you and walk straight into the home. It's called the barn home effect. So you see the end of the journey and then you are done. Okay, last chapter, just 2 or 3 minutes. How can you make your people thrive? Number 1, leave them alone. There's a book called Rules. And I've used that book extensively in the last chapter. Number 2, how rock stars. Now, again, a lot of research shows that you are what are called 10xers. Has anybody heard a term called 10xer? People who have a job, so I said 100xer. But we'll go with the term 10xer. And I've used a stand-up comedy comic in one of the stories here to show you how these 10xers perform so well. And the last one is the structures. So the last one and we'll close. There's a company called Supercell. Okay, it's a company based in Finland. It has now been acquired by a Chinese company, Tencent, and very good at making games. And these games are very popular. Now, you have joined the company. You want to be a gamer, and this is a job. So finally, you get to work with them, and you join in Finland, where they are based. On the first day of work, you are invited to a beer party. First day of work. And you're told that this beer party is to celebrate game that has been very successful. After a couple of fat lizard is a local brew, which is served at the party, you are introduced to this guy called Ilka. Ilka is the CEO. And Ilka is being polite to you and says, look, I'm glad you enjoyed this beer party, but we have a champagne party after a couple of days. Please come for that. Now you're young, you have just joined the company, you're trying to make conversation. So you tell Ilka that look, this must be a very interesting game. This team is developing. They are having a champagne party. What does Ilka say? No. This is to celebrate the game, killing. A party to celebrate the game that was done well, and a champagne party after a couple of days to celebrate the game that they're killing. So I put a quiz question in the book. Which of these statements is likely to be true? One, you are drunk. First time you're drinking, you had too much beer. Number two, actually, Ilka is drunk. Third option, that's the way Supercell runs. And the answer is C. C. Ilka runs the company in a very different way. He says, I'm the most powerful CEO in the world. And he argues that he says, I think of Supercell as a company of 340 entrepreneurs. That's their size now. I'm a big ice hockey fan. The coach does not get the ice score, but creates an environment for the players to be free and express themselves and take risks. And this company has produced only 10 or 12 games. They've been super successful. They're on the ice store. And the story along with rules, the Netflix story in that chapter. And that's why I say invert the structure. Let the people facing the client, people who actually do the work which is getting you all your profits, take those calls. Your job is to support them. That's it. And that's how he has made Supercell such a big company. It was worth more than 100 billion. You seem to be aware of it. There's a Harvard Business School case on the company that discusses all this. So to end, keep it simple and stupid. That's the way to go about it. Thank you very much for your time. And again, I request don't look for any academic content in the book. That is zero. But you want stories and all, read the book. It's a lot of fun and you'll enjoy the stories. And every story is supported at the end with how the story originated and which journal you can go to identify the story further. Thank you very much. And sorry, we finished 5 minutes late.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have any questions? I'm here. Yeah. Any questions on the talk? Anything beyond the talk also? Yeah.
Mike, happy pass. Thanks to our losing good participants. I'm here for 2 more days because I'm teaching in their program day after tomorrow. So I'm going to be around. I'm staying in the IMDC. So happy to engage with all of you. I come there for all my meals. But so on their behalf, I apologize that we delayed the start. But Amit told me, nahi, wo dhीरे-धीरे आएंगे, बुड्ढे लोग हैं. मैं कहा, ठीक है. No, I'm very fond of the GS program and I've been involved in it from the beginning. The GS 10K program, and initially it went to IIM Bangalore and I was very disappointed because I'm from IIM Bangalore originally. I did my PhD there and I'd been persuading Amit and a friend called Sunil, I don't know, Sunil Sharma, you know him. So Amit and Sunil are my buddies. We all lived next to each other when I was on campus. Ye program yahan leke aao. And the unfortunate part was they brought it after I left. But I teach in it regularly, and you have in October again, you're having your annual thing in Delhi. You had your thing in Bangalore a few months ago. I was there. I like that program a lot because the enthusiasm there. Unko budhe smiling. So he suggested let's do one session for them today, and then one session. I think the other section is busy today, and so I'm doing it for them tomorrow. I'm doing it for them tomorrow evening from 6 to 7. So I'm around and happy to engage after that. But thank you very much for your patience. And every story is authenticated. It's not a story. I use the word story loosely. I'm writing a bunch of short stories now, doing based on my imagination. But none of this is imagination. It is all supported by articles in journals, in liberal arts journals, in sociology, medicine, philosophy, psychology. So read it and enjoy it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, from I think Vikram Sarabhai Library. I'd just like to thank you, Professor Mukesh Sud, for taking us through such a nice, interesting.
Thank you.
Rather than what I'll say, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very basic question. The title says in simple things. What made you write about this book, or what is that you saw that this has to be written or documented?
Yeah, so I've written, this is my third book, and all my earlier books are with co-authors. Now they are very esteemed colleagues, and I like them and I enjoy working with them. But I didn't have the flexibility to do what I wanted because you are in a team, and I always felt that we are overcomplicating problems. We are overthinking solutions. So that has been a conviction with me for a long time. So this is a single author book, and I had a chance to work with her on one-on-one, where I could say what I wanted and get what I wanted. So this has been with me for a long time that we need to simplify things. We are just overcomplicating, overthinking, and we need to break. As I said, I'll repeat. You guys came a little later. The first thing is break a problem into smaller chunks. Never treat the problem as an amorphous big problem. Go to number 2. Word. Paradox. Accept opposites. Please remember, you can be happy and sad at the same time. It's possible. You can be flexible with your day and have a schedule. This is part of life. We do it all the time. We breathe in, we breathe out. Now, strictly speaking, they are opposites. And what is the third thing? Look, love, just look. And there I've used Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson because I'm a big fan of his, and Dharun could draw those illustrations well. So look for clues that others don't observe. They see it and they just give you an answer. But if you look a little deeper, it's giving you a story. And Sherlock Holmes unpacks the stories very well in all the Arthur Conan Doyle books. So it has always been with me to write, and I enjoy my co-authors don't like. This is very babyish. बच्चों वाली किताबें लिखते हो. अमित कहता है सुन साहब आपकी जो किताबें हैं ना, my 8-year-old son enjoys it more than me because there's so many pictures in it. So I like having a small illustration or a picture which then entices you to read the story. So this is something that I've done, which is my passion to put this out and write something with a lot of pictures and illustrations and jokes and light-hearted, and except that tentative story, which is a tragic story. All of the stories. And the tentative story I had to condense because the publishers didn't like it. In fact, it was half the book. Then we made it quarter of the book. We made it 1/8 of the book because it's a depressing story of where, because when you challenge your boss, you die. But if you had the guts to challenge your boss and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? When you know it's a wrong decision. Thank you.
Another small moment.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for joining this. Please join us for tea outside. Yeah.